Thanks, Sarah. It's good to join you here today. I'll be back here tomorrow a bit later than normally in my t-shirt, jeans and chasing children. I've got to attend a consecration of a bishop tomorrow. So the Almighty has the first call. But it's good to be able to join you this morning and to have a conversation. I love the title, by the way. What makes a food destination? It's one of the things, of course, that we scratch our heads about in government as well. And I'm sort of hoping that perhaps through a discussion today, we can actually come to some conclusions on that. Do you know, in terms of what we're trying to do in Wales and what we're trying to do as a government, I'm very, very pleased to see the way that the experience of good food in Wales has grown and exploded over the last few years. And of course, many people will come to us and say it's the role of government to do this and it's the role of government to do that, and government has to do all sorts of different things. But government is not a replacement for the creativity, imagination, and the ambition of people who make these things themselves. And you know, government can be an important part of helping to make things happen and acting as a catalyst, but government is not the be-all or end-all, and government is not the means by which we can achieve many of these things. That has to come from people who have that determination to succeed. What government has to do, of course, is to back those people and to ensure those people know that they have the enthusiastic and active backing of government. And you know, when we talk about what we're seeking to do in Wales, I'm very convinced that the government of Wales has to be an activist, proactive government, an agile government that seeks to think about what it can do to help people and then actually provide that help and provide the actions that improve the people's experience of food in Wales and improve and increase, if you like, the visibility of the experience of food in Wales. There are many things which I'm on Tuesday going to be launching the conversation towards a new food program in Wales. And one of the things that we're going to be seeking to do is to bring together a lot of different funding streams that exist at the moment in order to achieve a far greater impact. I'm very concerned that we spend far too much time possibly in Wales, possibly elsewhere, talking about some of the processes and structures that we have and not enough time talking about the product. You know, I've spent most of this week, and I'm really glad I'm coming to the end of this week, certainly for me anyway, talking about CAP, the new Common Agricultural Policy, and how that's going to be helping to support food producers over the next 7 years. But we spend so much time talking about the minutiae of a subsidy policy, we forget the purpose of that policy, and we forget about why it is put in place. I want to see Wales increasing its reputation as a high-quality food destination through improving food quality and range, raising awareness amongst visitors and encouraging tourism operators to use locally sourced food. And I want that to be the reality of people living in Wales as well. Do you know, one of the things that really strikes me is that we focus on food almost as a tourism experience, and we forget about the place of food in people's everyday lives. If you ask me what is one of the greatest issues, greatest problems facing my constituency, it's about 10 miles away from where we are today. Yes, it is the economy. Yes, it is the huge issues with benefit reform. Yes, it is joblessness. Yes, it is all those different things. But the biggest single issue facing my constituency is that of public health and poor diet and the issues that creates for individual people and families. When I talk to retailers in my constituency, talk to some of the supermarket operators, what they do is bring in pallets of peck meat and they sell it by the pallet load day after day after day. We don't sell much fresh food here, I'm afraid, sir. You know, it is a significant issue, and it is an issue that all of us have to address. And if there's something that we can do once we've got through the tyranny of the new CAP, it is the creating the linkages between the production of food, where from a farm gate through to a consumer, and then the people to ensure that people understand where that food comes from. I attended last year a great event in Pembrokeshire, Grow It, Cook It, Eat It, where children were actually being given the opportunity to talk to farms and to farmers, to food producers, food manufacturers, and being provided with the opportunity to understand that and cook food for themselves, to understand where food comes from. And it's one of the things that I'm very, very anxious to return to when we're able to move away from the process of the implementation of CAP. But to answer directly the question, what makes a great food destination? What makes a food destination? Let me try to answer it in the next few minutes, and perhaps we could have a conversation about that. For me, what makes a food destination is authenticity. People, if you want to create a destination for food, people must believe it. And where we are today in Abergavenny, I think the Abergavenny Food Festival itself helps create a destination for this part of the world. But this part of Wales, with Monmouthshire and Breconshire particularly, has the authenticity of being a great food producing area. Whether that is the sheep production here, the lamb production here, whether it is in the fisheries we have around here, some great fisheries in Usk and Wye particularly, but bringing those things together, we have a authenticity here about locally sourced food that cannot be replicated and cannot be replaced. If you produce a factory somewhere, you can move that factory all over the place, but you can't move some of the core industries of Wales away from here. And the authenticity that is inherent in this place, I think, is important. What I want to do as a government is to ensure that we are able to ensure that authenticity is something that people appreciate, that people value, and that is hardwired into a thriving food culture that will in itself ensure that people understand how food can play a part in a wider tourism offer. The second thing I would say makes a food destination is excellence. Do you know what is absolutely essential to us? When I travel with my family, yes, I want to eat well, but I also want to stay well. And I want accommodation that's of high quality, that's a good accommodation. I can take my family and stay there and enjoy that. I want excellence in what I see and what I do. And all too often in Wales in the past, I think we've interpreted excellence as being exclusivity. And we've confused the two things. And we need to have that emphasis on excellence. And excellence isn't something to be afraid of. It does, I think, sometimes create fears amongst people. But, we have a larder available to us of fresh local ingredients produced in Wales, from whether it's the black beef that we have here to farmhouse cheeses, lamb, seafood, and the rest of it. But there is excellence there, excellence in production and excellence in preparation as well. And we need the high-quality restaurants that will sustain a much wider food culture so that people can enjoy the excellence of food available to us, and to ensure that we are able to bring those things together into a coherent proposition for people. And the third thing I'd say that we need, things that are needed to create a food destination, is love. Love, sometimes overrated, sometimes underrated, I've experienced both, is something that is completely irreplaceable. And you know it when you see it. And, I think, politicians and particularly ministers have to be very careful, of course, when they start considering and discussing things like love. I understand that, and we've also read the newspapers. But can I say this? All of us know, when either we are buying a product or a piece of produce, or whether we're enjoying a meal or whatever, if that has been the product of love or if that is just a commodity on a production line. We know the difference. We understand the difference. All of us do. And you can't subsidize love. You can't create a toolkit. This is how you do it. This is what produces it. It has to come from within. And that takes me back to the point that I was making at the beginning, the role of government. Government has to be an activist, play an activist role for me, and what I hope to do. I hope that we can continue to help support food producers across Wales, from the farm gate through to the plate. But we can't replace and we can't create the love, the authenticity and the excellence that can only come from the people for whom the production of excellent food is a part of their lives. And I hope that what we can do, moving on from today and tomorrow and this weekend, is to work together to produce a food culture in Wales that is based on authentic experience of what we produce here in Wales, which has a focus and an ambition for excellence and is not prepared to accept second best, and that is based then on the love of good food, the love of making good food, the love of producing good food, the love of selling and sharing good food, and sharing that good food with friends. Thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr.
Alun Davies, thank you very much. I think, that talking about the love, the authenticity and the excellence is exactly will have touched bells with us here, because, if it wasn't for the love of food, probably none of us would be here. Personally, I think it's quite nice to hear politicians talk passionately about something within their brief. Now we're going to have some coffee and other refreshments in a moment, but we do have a bit of time. Alun Davies is happy to take some questions. Anyone who'd like to kick this off? Right, do you need a microphone, Simon? Would you like? I will bring microphones. I don't know if you're going to need one. If so, that one's on there. I can get you another one. If you'd like to all say who you are, that'd be great.
Simon Bills, we're just a resident of Abergavenny with an interest in food. Minister, if I can just focus on the first part of your talk when you talked about the importance of diet and public health. One of the issues here, I think, is allotment provision. And I just wonder if you can say anything about what Welsh Government might do in respect of allotments. I'm lucky enough to have an allotment in Abergavenny, but there's just a ginormous waiting list. And a lot of people I know would love to have an allotment and can't because, there's not the provision there.
Yeah. Allotments is something which until I was elected in 2007, I'd actually paid absolutely no interest in at all, I have to say. I've always been lucky enough to have space at home to be able to grow vegetables, and we have, myself and my family, since I was a child. So it's not something which it really crossed my mind. And since I've been elected, I have to say, I get letters regularly from people who talk about allotments, and they're not just based in the Cardiff area, which you'd anticipate, where land is more difficult, but it is across the whole face of Wales. We are going to. It's not actually in my brief, as it happens. It's in another minister's brief, but it's something we have been discussing, and we are looking at inserting a clause into a piece of legislation next year to actually ask local authorities to put a focus on the creation and maintenance of allotments. I think the problem we've got with allotments is that we used to have quite a few of them in Wales, and we've lost a lot of them due to developments. And I think we are going to be placing the duty on local government to provide space for allotments and for food growing. One of the things I tried to do when I was a deputy minister, when I was first appointed a couple of years ago, was to actually try to reintroduce and to support the concept of community growing as well. We do fund a community growing initiative in Wales. We don't fund it by a great deal. It's not much more than £1 million a year, unfortunately. But we are looking at how we can work with community groups to actually grow vegetables in local communal areas and community areas. Now that is not in any way a substitution for commercial food production, clearly. But what matters to me, and what matters to me increasingly as we move forward with a significant number of reforms in food production, is the increasing urbanisation of the Welsh experience. I grew up 10 or 15 miles away from here in Tredegar, and when I was growing up, being up on the hill, in the hills, in the mountains, was part of our everyday childhood. You know, we would cycle down to Llancanada, we'd cycle to Talabont. It wasn't very, very easy. And we had that connection with, whether it's food production or the countryside, which is being gradually lost as the decades go by. And I think we, as a government, do have a responsibility to reconnect a population with the production of food. And as I say, the last 2 years have been absolutely dominated by CAP negotiations largely. And we've had to get that done and have to get that right. You know, after I finish here on Saturday, I'm going straight back to Brussels Sunday morning for more negotiations on Monday. So it is something which is still a very difficult issue. But I do hope and I expect that when we're through this period, probably I'd imagine by the end of the first quarter of next year, then we will be able to focus our time and resources on much more positive, if you like, and wider social aspects of this policy.
I will take a question here and then one over there, and then I think we'll need to move on for coffee, but we can talk over coffee.
Thanks. It's building on the first question, to be honest. I was just wondering if the Minister had heard of incredible edible Todmorden.
Sorry, I didn't catch you.
Incredible edible Todmorden.
Todmorden?
Yeah, it's a village in Yorkshire.
Yes, it's got a brewery there, I know that.
I don't know what the brewery, it's more famous, I think, for its incredible edibleness. About 5 or 6 years ago, one woman, her name I can't remember, inspired the whole village to come together and said, let's take all the land in our village, our small town, all the public land, and let's just plant the whole place for allotment purposes, basically. So you might be driving past a roundabout and you'll see corn growing in the middle of the roundabout, grass verges outside of the police station. You can pick up arugula or rocket or whatever you want to call it, depending on the time of the year. The whole town is encouraged to be involved in the planting, the care for these allotments, and anybody and everybody can pick from them at any time of the year, basically.
So are you wanting the Minister then to kind of initiate something like that? Because surely Todmorden, the whole idea was it came from the people, not from government.
It came from the people, but I think it came from the people because there's one woman who led the whole thing. Perhaps in Wales, every single village, town, city, neighbourhood should be encouraged by government to have a single person trained up in that role and just plant the whole place as an allotment.
Okay, there's an interesting question for you. I mean, certainly their website's fantastic for anyone who hasn't seen it. And in fact, Sandy Green said you invited her down, didn't you, to a conference in Abergavenny some time. But presumably you wouldn't see it as the government's role to tell people to grow corn in their roundabouts.
I don't think it works if government tells people to do things.
They're more likely to do it if you tell them not to.
Yeah, but you know, but where I'll tell you what is the role for government, right? Is to enable people to create the structures whereby people can do it if they so wish to do it. Because what I find all too often is that you've got one arm of government encouraging people to do different things, and several other arms of government trying to prevent it actually happening.
So would you then? I'm presuming a question from you here. Would you enable people to do that more easily here in Wales?
I don't know what I could do to do that, but certainly I think through the planning law we need to enable people to be able to do that. And one of the things I'm quite anxious to do, and we talk about small rural communities, where these things are possibly easier, you've got less pressure on land and what have you. But, we've got to ensure these things aren't just a preserve of rural communities, but also happen in the cities, I've just been through 6 months of rowing with certainly 12 of the 22 local authorities in Wales about cutting verges, and what that does to bee populations. I've stopped my car and raged at poor people who have been cutting verges. And whilst I wouldn't agree with all of what George Monbiot says about rewilding the countryside, I think we've got a very, very good argument for rewilding some of the cities.
Simon Wright, I write and broadcast about food a bit and have a hand in running a few eating places. And I was really encouraged to hear what you say about improving the base food culture, and that's what we should be concentrating on, and in particular connecting people with where their food comes from and their ability to cook it. It begs one obvious question, is what we're going to do about that in education. I realise that's not completely within your remit, but in developing food policy that's going to be crucial.
Yeah, look, I think we do need to. When we we make this announcement on Tuesday, I will be talking about some of those issues, because, if I see the food strategy. I'm actually meeting my officials this afternoon. Perhaps I should have met them earlier this morning before coming here to discuss this. We need an industrial strategy to sustain food production. We need to be able to do that. We have to have an education strategy to develop skills to work in the food sector. We have to do all of these different things. But then we need to not forget the role of public procurement. I don't think it's not the be-all and end-all that some people think it is. The farming unions are constantly telling me that, we need to have, Welsh milk in Welsh prisons, as it were. Well, we've got 3. That's not going to sustain the dairy industry. So it's not the be-all and end-all, but government has to lead the way and lead by example. So we need to do things like that. We then need, my children who are in school in Wales, I want them to be eating Welsh lamb. I want them to be drinking Welsh milk. I want them to be eating Welsh apples, and we can do that. We've put in place structures now where more Welsh food is available for consumption. Puffin Produce, I think, is a great example down in Pembrokeshire, which is working really well. It means that, I can buy Pembrokeshire potatoes in Ebbw Vale. We couldn't do that 10 years ago easily. So, we put in structures in place to make sure Welsh food is available there for people. And then we need to provide people with the skills to actually understand that and make that a part of their everyday lives. And one of the things we're trying to do, I'll give you an example of one of the things we want to try to push as well, through both formal structures in school and informal structures that we have available to us in different communities. And in Tredegar, we're trying to bring the old General Hospital back into use. And of course, it's where the National Health Service was born. It's the Tredegar Medical Aid Society's General Hospital, where Iron Bevan got the idea to create the National Health Service. It is an iconic building in world history, in a sense. And clearly, we closed it, and it's fallen into disrepair. So now what we're going to do is to reopen it as a medical centre, but with a part of that which is dedicated to healthy living and healthy lifestyles. And the centre of that is a kitchen. And, we have to move to a place where boys and girls are taught to cook. When I was in school, I wasn't taught to cook because I was a boy, and I was sent off to metalwork classes, which were pointless then and has been pointless in every day of my life since then. And the girls were sent to do cookery and typing, and the 2 skills I left school desperately needing were cooking and typing. And the 2 skills that would help me today are cooking and typing. And it shows a grotesquely stupid education system, but all too often it still exists today. And we do need to ensure that kids, I've had a hell of a morning trying to get mine to school this morning. We won't go there. But ensure that children are given the experience of cooking. And, my 3-year-old is now going to school in Brecon. At 3 years old in nursery, we pay something like £1 every 2 weeks for cookery. And they do cooking at that early age. So it does happen, but I think what we have to do is ensure it happens everywhere, that it then happens for people who have left school, who haven't had good school experiences through Communities First and the rest of it, and that we need to put that focus on deprived communities where diets tend to be much, much worse. So I think we've got to do all of that, and so I think it's a very positive and great agenda.
I think we can sneak in one short question, if anyone has one more. I know I said we'd only have 2, but I got a feeling you in the room didn't like that.
I'm Jackie Denman, I'm a tourism consultant, and I'm not sure if you were here earlier to hear Sandy Greenslade talking about Monmouthshire's brave claim to be the food capital of Wales, but I wonder whether you can just say how Wales can use that to raise the bar across the country, as well as put that focus on Wales and help them to meet their claim.
Yes, I think it's great. This is the 3rd Welsh food capital I've been to this week, after Denbighshire, after Denbighshire and Anglesey. And next week I go to Pembrokeshire, who's also a food capital of Wales. But, I think it's a great claim. I won't make a value judgment, and, you can fight it out amongst yourselves. But I think Monmouthshire and Breconshire taken together, I know both very well, do have a great heritage in terms of food production and do have that authenticity. have that authenticity, which I think is absolutely crucial and important. You know, I was at the ESC show last Saturday, talking to food producers there, and you know, that love I spoke about was coming through. You know, the farmer who wants to produce the best beef, or wants to, you know, increase the size of a herd to actually create a viable dairy unit, and then wants that dairy unit not simply to be commoditized into some sort of cheddar or mozzarella production, but actually wants to use that to actually add real value to the community in which they work. You know, that determination shines through. And then, you know, I'm actually, you know, a food minister who does enjoy his food, and you know, I have myself privately, long before I was in politics, spent a lot of time. You know, we've got some excellent restaurants and hotels in both Breconshire and Monmouthshire, and we're very lucky with that. And you do see that locally produced, locally sourced food there on the menu, and I think that hardwired authenticity is absolutely crucial. So, you know, I hope that Monmouthshire continues with its ambitions. I'm not going to referee a competition in Wales between wherever any food capital would be, but I certainly do feel that we have to make Wales, you know, a destination as a country where, you know, excellence in food is taken for granted. And you know, you ask for short questions and short answers are what you're asking for, of course. I know that. But over the summer months, I travelled through a number of different agricultural shows from Pembrokeshire, Anglesey, Flint, and the rest of it. And the one thing that I found in common in all those different places was excellent food. Really very, very, very good food. Locally sourced, locally produced, locally made. Really excellent food. And we need to bring that together into a wider offer. You know, you talk about tourism. Clearly, you know, you need to have the hotel and the accommodation there, which actually will sustain food tourism. But you also need something else as well. I think, you know, you do need something to do before you go for dinner and after you've been for lunch. Well, after lunch I tend to go for dinner, but you know, you do need to have that overall package which is available for people. And I think in some parts of Wales we're actually getting there. And I would be very, very anxious to understand what tourism operators and what producers in different parts of Wales feel that we can do as a government to help sustain and help create that package. You know, I think there are things that we're doing at the moment which are quite useful in terms of, you know, we just launched this wine trail in Wales, which I was very anxious to do, and which I think is partly based here in Monmouthshire, and it's done very, very well. We're also launching things like, you know, promoting our Christian heritage in Wales with the pilgrim trails to St David's and to elsewhere, and with pointing out excellent hotels and restaurants there, and we're doing the same with the Drovers Roads. So there are some very, very important packages to create, but interconnect and add to our history, our culture, and our identity together with our food. Because I think, and I will finish on this point, I see you anxious looking at your watch.
Okay.
I think the one thing that does differentiate the food industry, if you like, in its totality from, say, electrical engineering, is that the food industry speaks to us of who we are as a nation and as a people and as a country. It reflects Wales back to itself and to the world. You know, when we bring people here, we're doing inward investment and the rest of it, to Wales, we serve them Welsh food, we serve them and we demonstrate what we can produce in Wales in terms of food. And that is how we identify Wales and how we badge our national identity. And, you know, one of the things that we're doing now is trying to ratchet up some of our exports, and we're discussing at the moment future trade missions to Canada, the US, and to China. And, you know, we are, and food is not just a part of that, but that is leading the delegation, leading the trade mission, because we will be using the UK TI networks, but Welsh food is what is there, creating the basis for the wider sales push in all of those trade missions. You can come with us, you're wearing your BBC hat, Sarah, it'll be a great trip. But food remains fundamental to us, and what we have to do, I think, is to ensure that it is threaded into a much wider offer for the whole country. Thank you.
Alun Davies, thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. And in fact, we'll know, I'm sure, more of his food strategy if you watch Wales Today on Tuesday night. Because I'm sure our Environment Minister will be there asking you about it. Alun Davies, thank you very much.